morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this. And welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, good morning. How are you, dear?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Every morning this week, I've been doing amazing. How are you?
Good. Have you been going to the gym in the mornings again? Does that have something to do with
Yeah,
it?
I think
Okay.
so. I think so. It's just more energy,
Yeah.
and then I got that Panera Plus where it's like I get the free coffee, the unlimited coffee. So it's like you get the gym and then
That's
you get a coffee, and it's just
okay.
like it keeps me going for the duration of the day.
Okay.
So
I was like, is this man really spending money on Panera coffee every single money?
no.
Like do what you want with your money. But I was like, that can't be. Like that seems we have free coffee here and you have your Four
No, yeah.
Sigmatic.
No, it's
Like,
with the Amex, they come with, like, the Panera Plus free subscription, so it's like,
got
might as
it.
well take advantage of it, it's on the way, and, yeah, I don't know, I feel like, in the moment, I hate myself, I hate my life, I'm like, "I don't wanna do this, I hate being here,"
Hmm.
but after and, like, you can see right now, and I think every morning you probably see I just
Yeah.
I have higher energy, I feel better, so
Yeah.
it's good, it's positive.
Good. 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 And are you going to that weird Panera that's attached to a bank by that gym?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the
It is.
strangest Panera I've ever seen. It's so weird. I'm good. I'll be a lot better next Wednesday when it's 81 degrees instead of 45 like it was this morning. You get your energy from the gym and coffee. I get mine from sunshine and
Yeah.
warm weather. And I'm very much so an outside plant and I need warmth.
Yeah, yeah. Or our
But
guest
no,
today,
it's
he's in South Florida, so he's
some
enjoying the rays, what, all the time.
sunny.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I would hope so. Let's just go ahead and jump in because it's really just going to be a pretty laid back episode today. We are going to talk about some business stuff, but we're mostly just going to chat about Prosper, I think, and kind of how the
The
show
show that
went. Kind
never
of do
ends.
a recap. Yeah, I know. Let's go ahead and bring him on. Today we have with us Kevin Sanderson from Maximizing E-commerce. Kevin, how are you doing?
Good, good, good. I was actually just Googling the Panera Unlimited Sip Club for
Unlimited sip.
$9.
Ah,
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So that I could see if you go every day, you definitely would get your money's worth. What do they
and you
charge?
Quickly.
could
Like
get it
$3 for a
every
cup
2
of coffee?
hours. Yeah, you could get it every 2 hours, whatever you want. You get a
Oh
tea, you
wow.
could get a coffee,
Yeah.
iced coffee, hot coffee. They have all the
Ooh.
additives, get, like,
Hmm.
almond it's basically anything that you need for pennies a day. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
That's
Well,
crazy.
I always sometimes think, oh, I'm going to get a lot of usage out of something to sign up for. And
Mhm.
so a good example is today, which is sort of related just for mental purposes, taking my son to a Cub Scout camp out.
Mm.
And back in October, we signed up. So that was what, 5 months ago, 6 months
Yeah.
ago, we signed up for right before on the way to the Cub Scout camp out. We had stopped at CVS and they're like, oh, you should get for just $5 a month. You can sign up for CVS Plus and you get a $10 credit every month. I literally have used it once and it's a use it or lose it. Oh, no, I've used it twice. One
Mhm.
time I used it and I used it for something that was $4 and it's like, okay, you used it. So my 10, they didn't
Yeah.
let me keep the remaining 6.
Nope.
So I was like, this is maybe just a reminder I need to cancel CVS Plus, but maybe use it on the way to the camp out and buy like a couple snacks or something.
There you go.
Yeah, everything is sort of shifting to this subscription, right? Where it's like a
Hmm.
constant reminder,
Mhm.
and I wonder if like they just see, hey, if you spend at least $10, you'll probably spend 20. It like what's it worth to them?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's probably something to keep you in the door because you feel like, well, I want to get my
hmm,
money's worth. So I'm
Mhm.
sure at some point you've probably bought a pastry or a meal that you wouldn't have bought at Panera, but because you were
right?
already there. It's kind of like
Mhm.
Amazon Prime. Like they
Yeah,
probably lose money on the shipping on the, what is it, $139 a year or something like that
Something like that.
nowadays. But because you keep coming back and you feel like you get like a little bit of extra perk or, looked at like a little special or something, people are
Mhm.
probably willing to pay for that. So that's probably why we see a lot more of these things popping up.
well, do you think that they're actually losing money? And correct me if I'm wrong, but don't Amazon sellers pay for the shipping on their products regardless on the back end?
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. Well, but you get revenue. You do get the revenue for shipping if they're charged for shipping. So
Mm,
no, but then there's also like promotions and stuff. So you rarely
Mhm.
ever really see that money. But
right.
yeah, as a seller, you just kind of end up eating it anyway. So for Amazon, it's a good deal.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I know I've talked to a fair amount of sellers where it's just like, well, and Amazon is so data driven that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, you ship in a sweater, and it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
the sweater itself you could just crunch up or you could roll up, and it's a very small. But if you ship it in like a poly bag, they
Mm-hmm.
measure the entire poly bag as the box or as the item dimensions. It's
Mm.
crazy to think how they let data drive every single decision that they make, unless a human, being the seller, tells them, hey, no, that's not actually the dimensions. These are the correct dimensions.
Right. Exactly. So you have to stay on top of you have to
Yeah.
stay on top of HAL 2000 or whatever it was from 2001 Space Odyssey. It's like HAL's running it over there.
Well, let's take a step back. I love how I said we're not going to really jump into business, and that's immediately the first thing that we did. So, Kevin, can you tell
Mhm.
everybody a little bit about you? Because I think that probably many of the folks listening know about you because Maximizing Commerce, you have a very active group. But for anybody who's not familiar with you, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. So I started selling on Amazon in about 2015. Well, it was 2015. And I had just kind of stumbled on a podcast that was talking about Amazon. It's called the Amazing Seller Podcast, Scott Volker. And he doesn't talk about Amazon stuff anymore. But at the time, it was just, he was presenting it in a way I was like, this is intriguing. And so this would have been the summer of 2015. I had gone to the Walgreens near my house and purchased a bunch of stuff that they were selling on clearance because you can do retail arbitrage. It's not just sourcing stuff from other countries. You could buy stuff in the store and sell it. That's not a scalable model, which I'll explain here in a second. But I shipped stuff in. I don't know if I made any money off of this first shipment, but I got a sale the same day that the products arrived in the warehouse. And it was just a rush of adrenaline. And then from there, I was hooked. I was like, I want to do more of this. So that fall, at the time, I was a high school football official, blowing whistles and throwing yellow flags at high school football kids. And then I decided to take a season's worth of earnings doing that and invest that in my first product. And then I ended up shortening the story here, ended up leaving my job about 3 years later. And then along the way, I started just finding ways to expand. And one of the things I was looking at is if I'm going to expand, I can either expand with more things to sell or more people to sell to. Now, as we all know, more things to sell, and eventually it doesn't matter who you are, even if you're Amazon, eventually you'll run out of capital just infinitely adding more things to sell. So we all have some limit on our funds. We also have to find more people to sell to. Amazon solves the initial problem of people to sell to, but we all quickly run into a ceiling on the products we're selling of how many people we can sell to on Amazon. And so we got to start finding other ways of doing it. And I was finding if I go to like create my own Shopify store, it wasn't just build it, they will come. If I start going onto, let's say, eBay, I remember the first person, it was a whole different customer expectation. First person I sold to was really angry and wanted a refund. It was hard to get into Walmart at the time. And even now Walmart, it's like, if you do really well, you might get like 3 or 4% of your sales. It seems like,
I'm sorry to cut you off. Are we talking private label products or are we talking
private
still
label
arbitrage?
products? Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. So that season's worth of earnings as a high school football official was invested into my first product as a private label brand owner. So thank you. So just to clarify that. And so having my own products now, running into the issue of taking a step back, this is something that's good because you don't have to go, keep scanning things in a store, which is why that model isn't scalable. Because it's just really time consuming. Whereas if you can have the same product over and over again, you have to find more ways to get more people to it. And so what I was finding the best for me was I take the product and I fill out a few forms, do the things I got to do to add my listings in Canada, do the same thing in the UK, do it in Germany, try other places around the world. I was way eclipsing any of my sales I was getting in off Amazon channels. And I was still diversifying my revenue and, basically casting a wider net, finding new customers to sell to, because the customers on Amazon.ca are not the same customers on Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm. I like the beginning of your story where you mentioned that you started with going to the clearance rack for Walgreens, because
Yes.
I immediately thought of Chris Gramlich, though, who just started grabbing things in his own home and selling them. And I was like, I'm sure your wife appreciated that you didn't take that method, because he said his wife was like, where's our toaster?
Oh, that's funny. No, my wife, I remember the day I got my first sale. I was probably in the bedroom at the time, and I was just kind of like flipping the anyone who's been on an Amazon app knows that if you want to see your sales, you have to like refresh the screen. And so I think most of us kind of develop a thumb that's tired from too much repetitive screen refreshing. But I remember going from a 0 to a 1 for that first retail arbitrage sale, and I go running into the living room. My wife was just like, "You have to see this!" Practically threw the phone. Like I literally, to this day, initially there was this look of panic of what is happening right now on her face.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I think she caught on quickly that it was
money.
It was all it was good. It was good. It was good. It was money, and I was just excited. But I think she was like, "Who is this possessed demon that's running?"
What have you done with my husband?
What have you done with my husband? And why is this person looks so insane? But so
well,
even though I wasn't selling our toasters, I was scaring her.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Don't we all? We always tend to do that somehow, right?
Yes.
Is taking a step back to the private label. Is this something that you were sourcing domestically, or were you sourcing from overseas?
Got it. Sourcing it from China.
Okay.
Sourcing it from China. And so as you're sort of building this up, you started in the US market. Now you're thinking about going into Canada and Germany and all these different countries. I guess, how did you learn to scale your supply chain with that? And what sorts of conversations did you have when you were scaling that to different countries? Were you talking with your manufacturers or your freight forwarders? I guess, how did you scale up that operation?
Well, and I have a secondary question. Was this also in 2015 still? What time frame did
you
this
would have been, so late 2015, starting to source and then starting to sell in, let's say, February of 2016.
Okay. So, and to compound off of that, not only what conversations were you having, can you tell us what kind of education and like information was available at that time about international expansion? Because I feel like it's just started to become a really big conversation, but maybe that's just because I haven't been in the game very long. So there's your 8-part question, Kevin.
Yes. So I'll do my best to answer that. And some of the points I might consolidate here, but basically, as I was starting to go into international marketplaces, with Canada, I just really took stuff I had in the US and just started sending it up north. And it's not quite that simple, because you have to get like a business number and an import number from the Canadian Revenue Agency.
Got it.
And there's always been people talking about this subject, but I think for a lot of people, it's just been one of those, like, you have to piece together like how it all works. And that's where I think the challenge is for a lot of people. Even to this day, there's not a lot of people talking about it that have done it themselves, like the whole puzzle, so to speak.
Right.
And my mind, I guess, kind of works in puzzles. So I used to work in events. I was ever getting into Amazon, I was a banquet manager at the most magical place in Orlando. I was I worked in the convention center of a very large hotel near the magical place in Orlando, but it wasn't this was after I left the magical place in Orlando. I worked at a large convention hotel doing a variety of convention jobs. And eventually my position got eliminated because we got bought out by an even larger hotel company, and my level didn't exist in their organization. And so I ended up working for a friend of mine's insurance agency, doing training and recruiting. So I think that actually ties into your question. Which for me, it was, in events, everything is like you have to kind of figure everything out just good enough, but it doesn't have to be overly perfectionist, because it's like you're creating something that's going to be teared down right away. So like when we were at Prosper Show, they had to have all the details in place, but not too many details, because at a certain point it's just too much. So like in events, you kind of learn like what are the things you need to have figured out on the front end, so you're not trying to figure out too many things once you're up and running, but then also knowing you got to flex because stuff's going to happen. So it kind of teaches you that
inevitably at least one thing is going to go wrong.
Exactly.
I've been in events and in weddings for years now, so it's like,
okay, yeah,
another game.
Yes, so like you have to have both a plan, but you also have to have flexibility in your plan, and so the ability to kind of flex that. And I think that skill set probably helped me figure out the international part. And then when I went into insurance, it was a buddy of mine's insurance agency, and this was right as the Affordable Care Act became a thing in the US, which is also known as Obamacare. And the thing with that is it was new and different, and there was a lot of figuring it out along the way, and there wasn't information. And my job was to take a subject that almost no one really understood and to try to figure out how to explain that to insurance agents and train them and like in an actionable way so that they could actually, help clients with this new thing. And so I learned a lot there. And so that all kind of tied in, I guess, with my ability to figure out the international part. And along the way, I was starting to find I was going to conferences and stuff. And I was just thinking, this is just the normal progression of what you do. Like, I didn't know better, because, when you start out your business, a lot of times you're just in your own little bubble, and you're just listening to podcasts or YouTube videos or whatever the case is. And you just assume everyone's doing the same thing you're doing. And then I would find, you talk about PPC, a lot of times people are on the same, especially if they listen to the same podcasts, it's like they're doing the same things. But then I would talk about international, and then they would kind of perk up like, well, tell me more. How did you do that? And like, and I think that's where, no, I won't say it. I think that is the genesis of where I started realizing there was a lot of people who are curious about the topic, but just didn't follow through on it just because they didn't have time. Maybe there just was a lot to figure out, or whatever the case was.
I was asking more about the supply chain side, because I think the conversations that I was having at Prosper, for example, it was sort of, well, what is the best method? Is getting it to the US and then and then shipping it to Canada and paying the duties to ship it to Canada. Can I afford that? Should I directly ship from China to Canada? Well, now I have to handle a completely separate supply chain operation from China to Canada, figure out warehousing if Amazon can't store it. And we know over the past 24 months, Amazon's been kind of funky when it comes to inventory planning. So I guess that's the standpoint where I was coming from. But when you were shipping from the US to Amazon to Canada, I guess, how did that go?
Yeah, so I've historically just shipped from stuff to the US. So I have a 3PL in Miami, for example. And I'll say to them, or I have some stuff that's local. I'm about an hour and a half north of Miami, and I have some stuff that's local where I live. And so depending on what I'm sending and how much I'm sending, I'll just say, okay, I want to send X amount. Now, the interesting thing, anecdotally, and I don't have data to support this other than my own experience and conversations with people that have lived in Canada, is my understanding of Canada is everything's just more expensive there. And people are just kind of same thing with Europe. So things are just more expensive. So if you take, let's say something is $20 in the US and the exchange rate would be, let's say $26 in Canada. So Canadian dollars, the same price would be 26 Canadian dollars. You might charge $27, $28, $29 and no one bats an eye. And that's just kind of the market there. And so the invisible hand of economics seems to shift everything a little bit more expensive up there. So you can oftentimes get away with incorporating the additional costs for shipping and supply chain into your price. Now, at the same time, too, I also know a lot of people and have had clients who decide they're going to ship everything directly into Canada to save on some of the additions, but some of it also depends on your product. And so the biggest thing you're going to, well, let's just say, depending on your product, for a lot of sellers, the biggest cost going across the border into Canada is going to be GST, which I'm not here to provide tax advice, but oftentimes, generally speaking, that would be a credit when you go to file your GST, which you have to do once a year, which is their sales tax. So basically, it's almost like you're being charged sales tax at the border on your declared value, but you can also get that as a credit. So if you collect, say, 5,000 Canadian dollars in GST, their sales tax, in the year, and when you go to file the following year for the previous year, you don't just give them the $5,000, you subtract out some of your credits, which would include the GST you pay at the border. And then they also have duties, but I have basically two types of products, and one of which seems to have 0 duty rate, and the other one might be like 2%. And I've always said to people like, oh yeah, it's like pretty much it's just going to be the GST. Duties are just pennies. Duties are just pennies. And it was just a couple months ago, someone challenged me on that. It was like, I paid 13% duties. And it might have just been because it's all based on the tax code.
Right.
And maybe that was a product that Canada was trying to protect their internal Canadian domestic
production.
Production. And so that might come into it, but do the numbers and see what it looks like. And maybe it makes more sense for you to just ship straight from China into Canada. If you're doing small numbers, maybe you just send it from, if you have a 3PL in Miami or Oregon or Kansas or whatever, send it in as needed. Cause at least that gives you the ability to also be a little bit more flexible in when you ship it, which could also sometimes help you on the flip side of, you don't have to carry as much inventory because you're doing a little bit more kind of just in time.
Right. It seems easier to me, but I don't know all the intricacies of shipping from China to Canada. It seems that would be the easier solution just in my eyes, because I have tried to ship one thing to Canada one time, and it was just a pen and an embossed notebook. It was like a thank you to a client at my previous company.
Yeah.
And it never got there. It was such a hassle. They held it up at the border. They were like, oh, you need this document. Oh, we need these fees. Oh, we need it. I was like, it's a notebook, y'all. They treated it like I was trying to smuggle something into Canada. I was like, just keep it. You take it. I don't care. Like, it was weeks trying to get this thing. It's a pain.
Well, exactly. But if you're a seller, to your point, depending on the declared value, I forget the exact number, you can send stuff without having to worry about the duties and stuff. So your value might have been just above that threshold.
It was like a $20.
It might be something like that, like $20. I don't remember the exact number, so don't go out and tell the Canadian government. Well, Kevin said in the link that it would X amount. But there is some value. I don't remember what it is, but it also depends on, like, if you're saying you could have it be you're charging the receiver for duties and taxes. Now, just as a word to the wise, Amazon will not be the receiver who pays the duties and the taxes. They will reject the shipment. So if you have the business number in Canada and the import export number, you can get your goods across the border. So I always recommend to people, get that number first. Could take 2 weeks. It could take 4 to 6 weeks. It could take 3 months. You're dealing with a government entity, and it's out of your control. If there's, a virus going around the world, then maybe that slows their efficiency down. If they suddenly require all of their Uber drivers in the country to register for a G, if they're caught up, it might take 2 weeks. It just depends. But at least once you start that process, then when you're ready to ship, you can just say, here's my number. And then oftentimes your first, especially with UPS, your first shipment can be a little bit daunting of like, you need to sign this form and do this form and do this form. But usually it's because you're setting up a brokerage account. And once you've done that first shipment, after that, it just kind of goes like clockwork.
Gotcha. All right.
It does seem like a lot of work. Right. And
Mhm.
particularly for those that are scaling up, that followed a very similar path to yours. Because I feel like your story is somewhat similar to what a lot of very successful e-commerce businesses stories have been for the past 5, 6 years. They started on
Mhm.
Amazon, just sort of trying it out, able to build this great brand, scale that up, trying out new marketplaces, new industries, new international marketplace, particularly. Uh, as they're doing that, I guess, so you mentioned going through and setting up all of that information first. Do, what sort of research do you advise that they do when it comes to keywords? When it comes to, hey, is this even a viable market for me to get into? And how do I set expectations for sales?
Yeah, good question. So you got to look through things with a different lens when you're doing research to go into
Hmm.
international marketplaces than you would to start a new product in the US. And there's a variety of reasons why I say that. So, for one, you could just take your normal product that you're selling and then go into, let's say, Amazon.ca, look up whatever keyword you might normally search for, and just see are similar products to yours making sales. And whether you use Jungle Scout, Helium 10, whatever, to figure out demand, you could use those. And then as long as it gets some sales, I would say it's at least worth testing out. And so you could start with a small quantity once you get registered, send it up into Canada, and then see what the actual sales numbers are like. And I think sometimes you learn the most from being in the arena than from analyzing data of others.
Hmm.
And so in Canada, you'll generally, depends on the product, it depends on a variety of things, but it can oftentimes be 10 to 20% of your US sales. I've seen people with less and I've seen people with more. But usually it seems to fall around there. And if you think about it, Canada is roughly 10% of the US population. So that would make sense of why those numbers would fluctuate or would be around that ratio. And then also Canada tends to have less competition just because there are those hoops you have to jump through in the front end. So not everybody that sells in the US will sell in Canada. So
Mhm.
it can oftentimes skew towards more than you get a disproportional share to the population of the country compared to the US.
Mhm.
And so, okay, so it sounds to me it does make sense to go through the US, have your US inventory, whatever it costs, just to test that
Yeah.
market. It's a very low barrier to entry, also. Um,
Yes.
what are sort of some of those steps aside from getting set up to be able to import, export, pay the duties, all the probably the most boring stuff. But when it comes to like listing creation and photography and keywords that you should be targeting, I guess how much research do they need to put in on the front end to have a successful listing to convert, let's say, 10% of whatever their US sales are?
Yeah, good question. So here's the way I say it. So, like in the UK, they use a lot of completely different words than we would use in the US. Now, even within the US, we use some slightly different words. So I grew up in Texas.
Mhm.
And if I said, if I wanted a carbonated sugary drink, I'm going
Oh
to probably
man.
refer to it as Coke.
There you go. All
Okay.
right.
Other places might refer to it as soda or pop, but we
Hmm.
all
Right.
kind of know what it is.
Right.
But when you start getting into other countries, they start diverging even more than that. So there's always going to be a little bit of it, but Canada is going to be very similar to the US. And so Canada is the second largest country landmass wise,
Mm.
but I've yet to see an exact statistic, but I've seen from fairly reliable sources anywhere between, let's say, 70 to 90% of the population lives within 100 miles of the US border. And if you think about it, it's just cold.
Yeah.
So, like,
Hmm.
if you live in somebody watching this that lives in, Minnesota or Wisconsin or Michigan can probably relate to how cold it is, which for the most part, everything in Canada is north of those places.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so that's why if you look at the map, where's Vancouver? It's fairly close to Seattle. Toronto is not that far away. Toronto and Montreal aren't too far away from like the Northeast US.
Mhm.
And so all these major cities tend to be fairly south in Canada. And so I think there's just also a lot of influence from the US. And so the words people use to describe things are going to pretty much be the same as they are in the US. And like a lot of things, when do you learn the best? When you're actually in the arena. And so you might start seeing, like, if you look at your search term report in PPC, you might start finding some different words than people would use in the US. But in Canada, I tend to find, and anecdotally from talking to other people, most people don't find a lot of completely different words. What is beneficial is you might rank for some slightly better keywords than you might have in the US just because of the less competition.
Well, and not even talking about, including Canada in the conversation, but also elsewhere. I think this was something that was brought up on your panel at Prosper too, was different spellings. So like for the UK, everything is spelled, with extra E's, or U's, behavior has a U over in England and it doesn't here. Like perhaps up in Canada, or color. Yes. Yeah. Like random, not random stuff, but stuff like that. And then maybe up in Canada, a lot of folks speak French. I think up in Quebec and like Montreal, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure. There's probably a lot of French Canadian slang. Like, how specific should these folks be getting in their keywords? Like,
I think it goes back to, it's better to, and this is my personal opinion, and I know there was another panelist who shares this opinion, and there was two other panelists who I think were a little bit more of, get everything wrapped up on the front end. I would rather people just get up there, and then you start learning when you're in there. And then if you're selling a trash can, and maybe they call it a rubbish bin in the UK, you just add that to your listing, or you change it up
later.
Okay. Yeah. And some of it is you could just look up when you're looking to see if similar products to yours are making sales. Just look at the titles of the main ones and just see, like, does anything stand out? Like, oh, I wouldn't have called it that. I'll make sure to include that, because if you see it in the titles of the main sellers, then you're going to say, like, oh, okay, well then that must be something that people are using over there. But the reason why I keep pushing on just get up there is because I will talk to someone who'll be really excited about wanting to go international, and they want to like perfect all the keywords and whatever. And then like 2 years later, they haven't done anything about it. Whereas the person who goes there and they look at the actual search term and they're getting motivated because they're seeing, like, oh, I'm getting sales. I could get more sales if I make these changes. I think it's better to do that, where you get the sales, you start getting sales, and you say, I'm going to optimize what's already working, as opposed to I'm going to make something perfect, but then I'll never get around to actually doing it. That's why I keep pushing on that, because having talked to so many sellers over the years, like I know the roadblocks in people's minds and what actually prevents them from selling. And usually the things they need to do on the front end to get selling and the things that stop them are different things.
Okay. It makes sense. And it sounds like particularly the Canadian market is more of just a lookalike audience of what we have here in the US. And it's just recreating that. So
they're just nicer.
Again, just nicer, just a little bit more polite, which we could all use a little bit more of, I think.
Yes.
But to me, it still sounds like, is Canada the first option? Is that where you push all of your clients to start with? And what is the roadmap after that?
Yeah, great question. For most people, I do think it's Canada. I think a lot of people say, oh, there's a lot of people in Europe, I want to go over there. But Europe is a lot more complexity. So Canada, it's nice because it's like their sales tax operates kind of like VAT. So I described that there is credit. So it's kind of like VAT, but light. The nice thing is the sales tax is added on top of the selling price over there. So you don't have to factor it in your margins. The government is easier to work with in Canada than it is in Europe. Europe is a lot more like, I hate to use the term entrenched bureaucracy, but that's for illustration purposes, would explain that, like, in Canada, they're like if you call them, they're super friendly and helpful. And like, I think genuinely want to, whereas in Europe, depending on the country and who you talk to, they're generally like nice and they're helpful, but like there's more of a culture in general in Europe of getting caught up of like, no, this form has to be signed in blue ink, of like, no, this is the wrong screenshot. And sometimes they don't even know what they're looking for. So In Europe, to get a VAT number, you really have to prove that within 30 days of getting the VAT number, you will be selling, especially in the UK and Germany. And so how you prove your case, so to speak, sometimes you're trying to provide certain documents and screenshots that they're asking for, but they're hung up on details that are quite frankly immaterial, but I don't even think they know that. So they just someone who's trying to check off a checklist. Some things are black and white, some things are somewhat interpretation. So there's also who are they talking to, at the government. And so it can be a lot more challenging, I think, getting into Europe. And I think it would be a little bit more discouraging. I think the results can be higher going into Europe, but I know some people who Canada's a higher sales platform than the UK is. I know people that the UK is a higher platform than Canada. So, but for most sellers, Canada and UK, between the two, one of them tends to be their highest out of the country or out of the US marketplace, which is why I think for most people, just going to Canada first. It's probably going to be one of your best results. It's going to be the simplest to get into culture wise, compliance wise, unless you're selling something like supplements or anything that makes any sort of health claims or is ingestible by people or pets. It's going to be, if you're selling phone cases or silicone baking mats or something like that, it's going to be fairly simple to go into Canada.
Is that what you do at Maximizing E-commerce? Is you take away a lot of this hassle, these mental roadblockers of like, hey, this has to be in blue ink. I didn't even know that had to be in blue. Do you help with a lot of that compliance?
Yeah. So what I do is I basically act as their, let's say you're going to climb Mount Everest. You could theoretically climb Mount Everest by yourself, but you'd probably want someone there with you. In fact, here's a better analogy. So yesterday I was going for a jog, and I live in a county which is just, as you mentioned in the beginning of this, it's kind of South Florida. And so I live in a county that's trying not to be the next growth north from Miami. And so they put in all these restrictions, one of which is to build a neighborhood, you have to have a lot of preserved space. So that's nice because there's a lot of nature in our neighborhoods, but then with nature, you also have nature. And so yesterday, as I was going for a jog, I happened to look right behind me as I was jogging by, and there was a baby rattlesnake. I took a picture of it. Thankfully, it didn't try to attack me. You'd be amazed how often rattlesnakes are found in this neighborhood. We're blessed that whenever a rattlesnake is found, people just go on the Facebook group and they tag, let's just say his name is Joey. And they tag Joey, hey, so-and-so's got a rattlesnake. And he seems to like going and getting the rattlesnake. He's got his process of how he goes about it because he's done it before. It's scary for everyone else, to try to get the rattlesnake. You don't want to just leave it around. And so, everyone gets Joey. So I kind of act as, let's say, the Joey to help people expand into international marketplaces. They're afraid of getting bit. So the challenge is, let's say you deal with someone who, let's say you have a company that's going to help you register for VAT in Europe. And maybe they're based in Europe. One of the challenges that people run into oftentimes is it's like asking a fish, what is the water like? What is water? They're just in it. So to try to explain something where people don't have the context of what is, two different people are having a completely different conversation just because they don't have the same context. So I can help provide that bridge, and my team and I help provide that bridge for folks with helping you figure out the documents, knowing when to say that's ridiculous. This is a perfectly acceptable document, or to say, okay, we'll get what that is. Cause at least having the context to know, okay, this is what they're really looking for. Or just catalog issues come up. Amazon makes it seem like it's just click a couple buttons, it's plug and play, but it never works quite that way. So depending on what someone's budget is and what their needs are, I have both done for you services and done with you services where we just do most of it for them, or they do most of it and we are there to help guide them when they have questions and things of that nature.
Gotcha. Well, let me go back and say Joey is Florida man.
He totally is.
Florida man. That is insane.
When it comes to we're all about e-commerce and supply chain, so I'm going to bring up supply chain a few times.
Yeah, go for it.
When it comes to their upstream supply chain, is that something that you help them prepare for also? Let's say the example from US to Canada. It's simple to get, inventory from your US inventory up to Canada, but it's a bit different when you're going to the EU and the UK. I guess.
Yes.
What sort of prep work do they have to do on that front?
Yeah, good question. So you would need a VAT number and an EORI number. And so the challenge, an EORI, I always forget what it stands for. It's like economic operator, something, or it's the import number for.
How do you spell it?
EORI.
Oh,
and so
EORI.
it's the,
okay.
Yeah, it's the
Economic
import number you need for.
Sorry, I just Googled it. It's the economic operators registration and identification number.
Oh, okay. There we go. So it's the identification number to get your stuff across the border. So what's confusing for a lot of people, and I totally get it, is that after Brexit, it used to be, or before Brexit, the UK was part of the EU. It was all the same terminology. When the UK broke away, they just said, we'll just keep all the same rules and everything in place and then slowly diverge away from what the EU is doing. So the terminology for, let's say, mainland Europe, which would be the European Union, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Netherlands, and then UK, they're going to have similar terminology, but the rules can be different. And one of the things I will say this, you just need a VAT number and an EORI in at least one European nation. Because in Europe, if any country you store goods in, again, we're not providing tax services here, but you need a VAT number where you're storing goods. And for the most part, any country you import into. So just use that framework. And then oftentimes people will suggest to you, whether it be Amazon will make a big push for this sometimes with folks, of register in all 7 countries in Europe. And that sounds good. And you can save money on fees and things of that nature. The challenge is that can be kind of overdoing it. And that can be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube if you realize that's too much overdoing it. I tend to go with start simple. You can always overcomplicate things later. Well, not overcomplicate things. You can make things more complex as time goes on, because you don't need all of those, because you could ship to customers in Italy and France from your store of goods held in a fulfillment center in Germany, for example.
Yeah, and our friends over at Simply VAT, not an advertisement, but Jonathan Matthews, I was on a panel with him not too long ago in Merchant Spring as well, Paul Sonneveld, but Simply VAT can definitely help. He
was with VAT Global, but now he is with VAT Global, but now he's with Z. So
okay. The framework works the same.
Yeah, it's there's tons of what I'm getting at. There's tons of partners and solutions out there. If that's a scary part at the end.
Yeah, don't let that be what stops you.
And then when it comes to product, because I know I've talked to a few of the brands that we work with about their packaging, for example, and even small things like one of them is a bit more complex of an electronic, but they needed to change out like a certain piece of tape that made it CE compliant so they could get the CE certification.
Gotcha.
When it comes to those small aspects like language on packaging, should they have the various languages on there? Should they change anything about their product, really?
So think about this. How many times have you bought something and everything in the packaging is in English, and you open up the instructions and there's 7 different languages?
Everything.
everything.
Pretty much
Everything.
So I was just talking about this with with someone who actually was a former guest of this podcast earlier today, and we were talking about this kind of very subject of like the language and how specific do you need to be, and things to think about. Just the general framework we talked about is, think about like in the US, people get almost offended if you have U in color, or if you had organize spelled with an S.
Yeah.
Yes, I
People
do
get almost
personally
mad
get.
about that. Like
Oh,
they
I
need
get hot. I'm
Yeah.
like, they're just, that's
they
not
need to
it.
speak English. You know, and it's like, well, that technically is the English version of
Yeah.
English. But you know, Americans get kind of like annoyed by that kind of stuff. Like we have a very American centric, and I say this as an American, we get kind of a very American centric way of looking at things.
Mhm.
Still, how many products do you see ranking well that are in, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but are like partially in Chinese? Like, you know, people have
Broken
used
English, really bad
the
broken English.
broken
And
English.
really,
Yes, the
yeah.
Chinglish, as sometimes people call it. And when you think about that, you go to other countries, they're even less sensitive than we are in the US, because I think they're just the reserve currency of the world is the US dollar. Everything kind of revolves around the US. How much culture in the world is influenced by the US versus vice versa.
Mhm.
So it's just, I think the world is used to the US and kind of a US centric way of looking at things. Could you enhance your customer experience by maybe making the packaging have more German on it, or whatever the case is? But then you're going to run into the issue of like, if you have goods moving around Europe, like, are you going to annoy your Italian customers because you put French on it? Like at a certain point, like, when does it really matter? And are you solving a problem that's going to make a difference in your business? Whereas maybe just you have an insert that just has more language options in it.
Mhm. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, it is very American of us to care so much about language.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that even the listings that are in either have poor grammar or misspellings or
Mhm.
are in broken English, I think that they still do well because we're all just shopping by pictures
Exactly.
and not even paying attention to the copy that's on the picture. Because now I definitely do. After, you know, having worked here, now I'm going over everything. I'm like, God, this is awful. But like, we're just looking at the product. Is it blue? Is it large enough? You know, is it 24-ounce purple or is it 20-ounce purple?
Does it
Okay,
solve
great.
my
Now
Right.
I buy it.
problem?
Yeah. Does it solve
Exactly.
my problem? Perfect. Buy now. Done.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
reads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where I think people really should care as much about language, more so than like some other parts where maybe like the grammar is slightly off, which you can always improve that later on. You can hire translators, but you don't want to miss out on, especially in foreign language marketplaces and somewhat in the UK, if it's a keyword that you wouldn't have thought of that's driving sales. And so it's more like, because you got to think people are typing in a word. So Amazon is basically no different than Google and Yahoo and Bing and YouTube, which are all search engines. And Amazon's a search engine. It's just a search engine people use to buy stuff. So does the search engine know that this is a product for a certain keyword, you know, trash bin versus rubbish bin or whatever the case is? So does it know to include this? And so sometimes including certain words in your listing can have more of an effect on sales. But again, it's better to start, learn, optimize. I tend to find for myself, I'm more likely to do something if I'm on the hook for it. So if I have it in that marketplace, I'm more likely to take the time to really figure out what are the words people actually are looking for, and not just some random way of, you know, trying to come up with keywords and realizing that it was inaccurate, because the market's going to be the most accurate. What are people voting for with their wallet?
And doing that on the back end keywords as well, right?
Yeah,
Making
you can do it
sure
in the
that
back
those
end
are
keywords too.
all
Yep.
plugged in. Now, one piece of it is inventory, right? And I think a question that might come up particularly as you're planning to expand internationally, is how much inventory should you allocate for like testing in the EU or in the UK or in Canada? Do you have any general advice that you typically give brands?
Yeah, my general advice is don't get too optimistic. Sometimes people get like, "Oh, I'm going to sell so much." What's going to end up happening is, let's say you have 30 SKUs you send over to UK. For some people, it might be 3. Some people, it might be 300. Whatever it is, realize, let's say you get 10 to 20% of your sales in the US, you get in some of these other marketplaces. It's not going to be exact per SKU. You're going to have some
Mm,
SKUs you're going to be disappointed by, and some SKUs you're going to be like, how did that do so well? So my general suggestion is, just as a rule of thumb, if let's say you're expecting 10% of your sales, say, okay, what would I need for 10% for 3 months? And if you have to, go up or down, for case packs or whatever, just it's not um it's not a, exact number we're trying to come up with. We're trying to come up with something, because we got to make a decision. Sometimes it's better just to make a decision and do something. And so if you come up with a number like that, and let's say you run out, that's only a good problem to have. And this is incremental sales anyway, so it's not tanking your business. And so if you can just get some incremental sales, and once you get data, then you can say, oh, okay, I need to order more, or I need to order less of this particular product, because now you have actual data behind it as opposed to guessing. But if you think your sales might be 10-20%, then that would be about how much you would order. Because I've seen people too, like, okay, I order a container at a time for the US, so I'm going to order a container for the UK, and then they're disappointed that it took longer to sell through. Well, that's why, because it just they don't have the sales. And if anyone finds another Amazon.com, please let me know.
Well, I know there's tons of options out there. We've had many guests, including Paul Sonneveld, talking about many other marketplaces outside of Amazon. I know right now we're focusing on Amazon more than anything, but I guess to that point, it's also talking about planning out your capital for advertising, right? And it's I guess, what sort of research do they need to prepare for when it comes to budgeting? Is that just using something like Jungle Scout or Helium 10 and guesstimating how much they would spend?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So my general philosophy on PPC is, as long as you're at least breaking even, why do you even need a budget? And so especially one thing to keep in mind too is, when you go to these other marketplaces, this isn't perfect, but generally speaking, your reviews will carry over with you. It's never perfect. Sometimes it's off by a few. Sometimes it doesn't work for whatever reason. But if you're using the same UPC or the same ASIN, you should have your reviews carry over. With Amazon's catalog, sometimes things don't work perfectly, but generally speaking, that's what's going to happen. So you're not starting off at zero. And so you have some social proof. So it's not starting out where it's just, you need to have huge amounts of capital to try to, get your way into the marketplace to get some initial reviews, because you'll have some initial reviews, generally speaking. And you're usually going to a marketplace where there's less competition too. So you're not fighting as much. And so I would say, from a capital standpoint, like, I wouldn't worry too much on the capital, because remember, the one thing about Amazon ads versus other types of ads is your cycle is usually just within days. And so if you have your ads coming out of your disbursements, you're getting paid back for what you're paying in ads sometimes faster than you're paying for the ads.
Because of those 2-week disbursement cycles.
Because the disbursement cycles, and oftentimes, let's say you start in a new marketplace and it's slow, and let's say you're spending the equivalent of $100 a day on ads, and so let's say they charge your account every $500 ish. Well, it's be the local currency, but just go with this for now. And so let's say Amazon puts the money into your disbursement account when it ships. So if, let's say, you never have more than a day or two's worth of orders waiting to ship, but it's about 5-day cycle before the money gets charged to your
Got it.
account. That means you're always kind of ahead, because the sale you made off of that advertisement, you might not necessarily being charged for that advertisement to your disbursement account, which I recommend, especially in foreign marketplaces, have the money come out of your disbursement account, not charged your credit card. So that could affect your cash flow cycle as well in a positive manner.
And we touched on it a little bit at the very beginning, but I think it's a question top of mind of everyone, especially with all this content coming out around Walmart, right? And sort of this split decision of, my brand is doing well. I know I have to expand, but do I make the choice to expand internationally, or do I make the choice to expand domestically onto a marketplace like Walmart? I guess, what advice do you have there?
Well, what's your opinion first? How do you feel about that?
Well, let's give my opinion based on my own results. Now, I have probably spent a lot more time figuring out international marketplaces, so that's my caveat. I have more experience selling in international marketplaces than I have in Walmart. The challenge with Walmart, though, is you have to figure out a new algorithm, a new terms of service, new logistics of getting things to the customers. And so the thing to think about is, but how does that translate to actual results? And so my sales on Amazon.com, we'll just use, I'm pulling this up because I have in my other screen a presentation I did. So my results for Amazon.com, let's say the 30 days leading up to Christmas Eve, just because I have this data handy, was about $78,000 in sales on Amazon.com.
Okay.
Internationally, would have been another, let's say, $27,000. So about a 34% bump on my sales.
Okay.
And so that made my total Amazon 105,000 for those 30 days. If I look at Walmart, and this was the best time period I've had on Walmart yet, my sales for the same 30-day period were $176.
Oh, man.
My sales in US dollar equivalents in Amazon Australia, which is not one of my best performing marketplaces, were $540. So about 3 times as much.
Gotcha.
And Australia is never one of the ones I say go to first, because it's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Can I ask what niche this product is in, or what category?
We'll say kitchen gifts.
Kitchen gifts.
So for me, this is my busy time period. Every marketplace I sell in or off marketplace, I will do the best. I will do all year long. And I had higher rankings for the products organically on Walmart than I did on Amazon, really Amazon anywhere. But my sales still were. I hear some of the Walmart, I hate to use the word gurus, but some of the more Walmart friendly folks,
savvy folks,
saying 5 to maybe 10% would be an expectation for Walmart. And so with Walmart, you got to figure out a lot of things. The ad platform doesn't work the same. The algorithm doesn't work the same. There's a lot of things that even once you're up and running, you figure out how do you even get your listings up there? How do you do all these different things? Walmart sounds like kind of a new shiny penny. And I was just looking at Fortune 500 the other day. Walmart is number 1. Amazon was number 2. So you kind of think like, oh, okay, well, they're a bigger company. Well, where's their revenue coming from? It's coming from the stores.
Right.
And Walmart.com, remember, Amazon is basically kind of like Facebook and Google and all these others, where historically you just sign up, and if you screw up, we'll shut down your account. Same thing with creating a YouTube account. Walmart is legacy because there was not infinite space for people to create a YouTube channel or add your product on, because there's limit on shelf space. So I think there's a little bit more of a mindset of a legacy brick and mortar retailer built into their system. And there's also a legacy of we're in charge here. And so one of the things too to keep in mind is my understanding of their algorithm is 1P sales, meaning if you are if you're
Vendor.
selling your product, you're a
Mhm.
vendor to Walmart, you're going to rank higher than if you're 3P, and it's a little more. I think Amazon probably does that a little bit for themselves too, but it's more, let's say, my understanding is it's more impactful on the Walmart side than it is on the Amazon side, to your detriment if you're not 1P. So another reason. So there's not as many people for a variety of reasons. If you're selling, let's say on Amazon in Canada, I have met one person, and I keep saying this, and I say, someone's going to come challenge me. I still have only had one person challenge me and say, my sales on Walmart in the US are higher than my Amazon Canada sales, as long as they had at least a good presence in both. And once you're up in Canada, it's the challenge is figuring out the logistics and the import forms and the getting the business number and adding your listings. Once you're up and running, it operates pretty much just like Amazon.com. Once you're up in Walmart, you still had a lot of challenges to figure it out on the front end. You're still going to be figuring out a lot of things on the back end. And so you got to think about it. Which is a better return on investment of time with result potential, and which is actually going to cost you more additional time to run? And I would say almost without fail, when I have talked to people, it has been going into international marketplaces, especially if you go into the low-hanging fruit ones like Canada and UK, tends to be a lot less work both on the front end and the back end than Walmart US. It's just what scares people. What is the rattlesnake for a lot of people is the hoops you have to jump through in the front end for Amazon International. But that also means once you're on the other end, you tend to have a more of a moat around you with less competition, because not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're seeing what 0.1% sales, but one thing I don't want to neglect is that the fact that you are also on Walmart. You are taking the opportunity to try it out.
Yeah. I'm not just saying, hey, I think it's better. I've tried it. And, it's like, it doesn't work quite the same. They don't have as robust of an ad platform. They don't like it. Just could I probably spend more time on Walmart and grow my sales? Yes. But also at the same time, too, with all the other logs in the fire I have, so to speak, is that really going to get me the results on my efforts compared to other things I could be doing? And the other day when we were at Prosper, I snuck out of some presentations to go look at, I was like, okay, what's in the, because there was different tracks. So the international had a track and Walmart had a track. Walmart was attracting more people to the sessions for the Walmart track than the international track was. Realistically, if people that were in the international track versus people in the Walmart track follow up and go and do the things that they learned, which group is actually going to see higher sales and have less competition because there's less people doing it? So it just proves that the shiny penny is Walmart, and that's going to create more competition on Walmart for a smaller pie. Whereas Amazon International, it's still low hanging fruit and not everybody wants to do it. So that doesn't mean it's bad that not everyone wants to do it. It's just they don't want to fill out the forms or whatever. But are you going to let a couple forms get in the way of you having higher sales than you would get anywhere else? And back to my whole point about, if you find another Amazon, let me know, because the juggernaut is still Amazon.com. The second juggernaut, I think, is Amazon International.
Talking about subscriptions that we need to cancel and that we need to spend money on, the Walmart Plus that's been sitting on my phone for the past 5 months unused.
Oh, wow. I've never gotten into that. I really don't. I go to Walmart in person. I never order from Walmart online. I go to Amazon. But anyway, well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I hate to say we have come to the end of our hour, but if folks wanted to get in touch with you, ask you any questions about anything that you shared today, or kind of become part of your community, work with you, either the done for you or done with you, where can they get more info on that?
Yeah, if they wanted to, they could just reach out to me directly, Kevin at maximizingecommerce.com. As well as if they want a checklist to walk them through some of the steps, they could go to internationalchecklist.com, and they can download a free checklist, which will walk them through step by step how to do some of this stuff.
Oh, perfect.
That's
I'll be sure
awesome.
to link that in the description too. I don't think I was aware of
Thank
that
you.
one. International checklist.
I don't think I told you about that, but yeah, I
I don't think so.
came up with
Okay.
that on the fly. It's an existing page, but I don't think I told you about that one. But yeah,
Okay.
internationalchecklist.com.
Perfect. And then your regular website is maximizingecommerce.com, right?
Yes. Feel free
Awesome.
to
And
go on the contact
podcast.
us there.
And your show.
Oh yeah, and I do have you can go to youtube.com/maximizing ecommerce, as well as just look up Maximizing E-commerce on your favorite podcast app.
Or Google. You're the first
Or
show that
Google.
pops up. So I mean, you're all over the place.
I am all over the place, I guess.
Well, perfect, Kevin. Thank you so much. We've really appreciated your time today and enjoyed this. For some reason, it's not letting me hide this banner back. There we
there you
go. There we go. Wi-Fi's been all weird today. But perfect. Thank you. This was awesome. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. It was fun.
Thank
Of course.
you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in. If you guys liked what you heard today, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share the show with your friends, subscribe, and be sure to turn on that notification bell so you never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. We are like full booked up for the next 2 weeks and some change. So we're going to have a lot of awesome conversations with some other Prosper speakers like Kevin. We have Manish and Matt and Eddie coming on. Come along the ride with us, you guys. We're going to be all over
The show
place.
that never ends.
Never ending. Prosper show never ends.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. We will talk to you next week then. Everyone have a happy Friday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.